Welcome to this amazing 30-year anniversary celebration of Out of the Kumbla, Caribbean Women in Literature. I begin with the land acknowledgement from Cornell University. Cornell University is located on the traditional homelands of the Gayagohono, the Cayuga Nation. The Gayagohono are members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and contemporary presence on this land. The Confederacy precedes the establishment of Cornell University, New York State, and the United States of America. We acknowledge the painful history of Gayagohono dispossession and honor the ongoing connection of Gayagohono people, past and present, to these lands and waters.
And I will follow by reading the Lenape land acknowledgement for the New School. The New School, where I teach in Manhattan, is a co-sponsor of this event. And we are located on what was once Lenape homeland. We honor and respect the Lenape people, their history, their culture, and their presence today. We acknowledge the painful history of their dispossession from their homeland and their scattering across the United States and Canada, but we value immensely that they're still here in Manhattan. So I'm going to open with a few remarks, welcome and a little bit about the collection, and then hand over to Carol. I first want to say that although this is written rationally, I am close to tears of joy to see everyone. It is just so wonderful. Thank you. So welcome on behalf of Carol and myself, from our co-sponsors, the chair of my literary studies department at the New School, Carolyn Valanga-Behrman, who cannot be with us this evening, but sends her very best wishes. We thank you, our participants and our audience, for the celebration of a particular book, but also the thriving field of Caribbean women's writing. That body of work is far beyond the scope of any single book to cover, including the region and all the main diasporas, the UK, the US, and Canada. Something to treasure that life spared us to be here together in this very difficult, heartbreaking time. We acknowledge the absence of 3 original contributors to Kumbla who have passed, Jennifer Carnegie, Bebe Clark, and Lemuel Johnson, knowing that they would be here if they could. We are so grateful for the continued blessing of Sylvia Winter, our revered elder and informing spirit. Also, thank you to Chris Warford and his team for their patient and utterly professional technical support, to my research assistant, Alexa Rockanova, to our co-sponsor, the Association for Caribbean Writers and Scholars, and to Cornell. But now to a little history of the making of Kumbla. It is 30 years. Carol and I, with Ben Abusia, who is with us here tonight, collaborated for successful panels at the African Literature Association's annual conference in the 1980s. But when Carol and I settled down to getting this book done, we had to find a lot of determination to overcome geographical distance and technological limits. This is ancient history now. But we need to remember, I was at the University of the West Indies, Cape Hill, Barbados. Carol was in Binghamton, at SUNY in New York. Tonight, we gather here from both sides of the Atlantic and from the Americas. No big deal because of Zoom. But when Carol and I worked on this book, we had no internet. Only landlines, typewriters, packages in the mail, and occasional meetings in person if somebody could get on a plane. We could not send out a call for papers across the world as we do now. The book was built 1 contributor at a time, necessarily focusing on getting it finished, not able to make it either as inclusive as we dreamed of doing in the beginning, or a map of all the writing by Caribbean women, even appearing at that time. Naturally, Carol and I talked a lot, and so we came up with the idea that over and above the introduction, we would do a conversation. To our surprise, this has often been specifically talked about by readers who liked it. It had both productive difference and common ground. They noticed that. Carol is very good to work with, by the way, and I'm enjoying our work on the new Kumbla project now. We have named the sections of this evening's program Conversations, Now you will see why. But a book needs a publisher, and here we are very lucky. On behalf of Carol, myself, and our contributors, deep thanks to our publisher, Kazahun Shikole, and all his staff at the celebrated Africa World Press, which has been a powerful decolonizing model in the publishing world and an unfailing support for many writers in all kinds of genres for a very long time. We hope Kazahun will be with us this evening. We're very honored to have him as our publisher. And we are now working on Kumbla 2, which renews our connection with Africa World Press. So now I hand over to Carol to talk about the book itself and the Sylvia Wynter afterward.
Well, again, welcome. Out of the Kumbla was published in 1990. We are pleased to have been the first book of scholarship in what has now become a recognized field of study. We also recognize Caribbean women writers as if from the first international conference published later that year from the Wellesley Conference organized by Selwyn Kudjoe and his students, including writer Patricia Powell. This was certainly one of the first meetings of Caribbean writers, prelude to the founding of the Association of Caribbean Women Writers and Scholars. Many of us met each other then for the first time. I, for example, met Beryl Gilroy at that conference, and we remained friends until her passing. Up until then, the only places one could present a paper on Caribbean writers was at the MLA, though very Eurocentric in orientation then, hopefully not now, and the CSA, Caribbean Studies Association, very social sciences in oriented then, although now it's a bit more open. But the African Literature Association conferences accommodated African diaspora literatures as a topic. Sylvia Wynter was one of the speakers at the ALA Cornell Conference in 1987. Indeed, Caribbean writers like Paul Marshall and Kamau Brathwaite were often presenters at ALA conferences from time to time. It was then at an ALA when Nambika, Studies of Women in African Literature, edited with Anne Adams Graves, my friend, colleague, who is in the audience, I know she said, was being promoted, that Elaine said, why don't we do one like this on the Caribbean? We thank Kazahun then, who is in the audience, for making this leap to recognizing the space for work on African and Caribbean women's writing. Major presses, university presses like Duke or Rutgers or Minnesota, have since followed his lead. Elaine then, based at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill, invited UB College to contribute. Nancy Morehan was visiting Cave Hill, and so she was able to get an interview with her, which is in this collection, titled A Womanist Vision of the Caribbean. Back then, as you can tell, the language of womanism had entered the lexicon by Alice Walker, and some of us were trying to find applications for it in the work. Some were using it outright, as did Nancy Morehan. And Wynter, Sylvia Wynter, does engage it critically too in the afterword. Now, Bessie Phillip from Tobago via Canada contributed that classic essay, The Absence of Writing, How I Almost Became a Spy. We tried to cover a wide range of the Caribbean geographically, though not exhaustively, organized in 3 parts following our introduction and conversational preface. Part 1 was titled Woman Consciousness, Writing History and Redefining Identity in Caribbean Literature. Part 2 titled Constricting and Expanding Spaces. And Part 3, Caribbean Women Writers, Redefining Caribbean Literature, which included a range of writers, some of whom you will see today, hear from today. So finally and briefly on that amazing edition of the historic afterword by Sylvia Wynter, titled Beyond Miranda's Meanings on Silencing the Demonic Ground, I have to use scare quotes, because she does, of Caliban's Woman. This was one of the major places where many in the U.S. Academy began to read and study Wynter. U.S. and I should say Canadian Academy, because that was the first time I met Ronaldo Walker. We honor Sylvia Wynter then, our distinguished elder this evening. But I was at an event at Berkeley when I met Abdul Jan Mohammed of Manichaean Aesthetics. He asked me what I was working on, then as scholars do, and I told him we had just finished editing a book on Caribbean women's writing. Though the work on the book was complete, he thought it would be a good idea to ask Sylvia to contribute an afterword. I approached her with trepidation, as she was even then, in my eyes, the formidable scholar who C.L.R. James had invited to his class at Howard during my graduate school years. To our joy, she agreed, and we delayed publication, waiting excitedly for this afterword, which we imagined would be about 20 pages or so. When it arrived, after quite a few weeks of waiting, it was 127 pages long. Our publisher, of course, said we could not enlarge the book by that many pages. We decided, after consulting several options, to include the opening section only. Of course, Winter, true to form, has continued to work out several of those other themes included in the afterword in her subsequent publications, now available in other places. But this is our celebration. All of our contributors, scholars, and writers in the field, well-wishers, those who want to learn more about Caribbean women's writings, our students, we welcome you. We mark the field's development, but we also signal our area of study as definable and recognizable, and see its future development as assured. As with Black women's writing, the depth and breadth extends in both directions. I thank our contributors who made that historic text possible, and above all in this format, recognize the second and third generations of scholars who are advancing the study of Caribbean women's writing into the contemporary place that is where we now are. Caribbean women's writing then continues to animate the larger adjacent fields of African American literature, Black women writers, Caribbean studies, post-colonial and decolonial theories, abolitionist discourses, Caribbean and African diaspora studies, LGBTQ studies, Black queer diasporas, environmental studies, and all other related transdisciplinary fields, even as it exists in its own right. Reading the following tells me that we have done the work we set out to do. This from Alexis Pauline Gums, quote, "This book changed, shaped, made my life," unquote. Our dedication to Out of the Kumbla, which we manifest and continue to celebrate, said, quote, "To the many unsung Caribbean women who write, sing, tell stories, and struggle to make their voices heard. Welcome to this amazing 30-year celebration of Out of the Kumbla Caribbean Women in Literature. This evening is organized into 3 conversations. Greetings from a selection of available contributors will start. Then we go to the field of Caribbean women's writing and the expansions and extensions in the 3rd section. This is a celebration though, so make sure you have your toasts ready for the end of the evening. I will have mine. Welcome again.
Good evening. My name is Giselle Anatol, and I'm the current president of the International Association of Caribbean Women Writers and Scholars. Greetings on behalf of the organization. I am truly delighted to have the opportunity to welcome you to this celebratory virtual space. What an auspicious occasion. The 30-year anniversary of Out of the Kumbla. I just can't believe it. I grew up on this book. Still have it on my shelves. I was introduced to it at the very start of my graduate career, studying Caribbean women writers under the tutelage of a marvelous array of mentors, professors, such as Sandra Boucher-Paquette, Carol Boyce Davies, Michael Dash, and I return to it regularly in my teaching and scholarship. It has definitely withstood the test of time. So I invite you all to raise a glass to 30 more years of rich synergy, robust conversations, and rigorous scholarship. Thank you.
So now we will begin the contributions from our original writers. And the first one will be Pamela Mordecai, who wrote the foreword to Kumbla, and is a very important writer in her own right, as we all know. She's unable to be here with us tonight because she lost her husband tragically a few weeks ago, but she has sent a video.
Good afternoon. I am very proud and pleased and privileged to be part of this celebration of Out of the Kumbla, as I was to be part of the book when it was put together by Elise and Carol 30 years ago. I'm going to begin with a very personal story. About a month ago, I lost my baby father and partner of 54 years. Martin Mordecai was a brilliant writer. You should own his historical novel Free and read it. As a result of that, I have lost the memory of everything. I remember nothing. And so I'm going to leave to other people the exploration of the importance of the essays in Out of the Kumbla. Martin and I were publishers in a small way, and so I thought that what I do is speak a little bit about the place of Out of the Kumbla in an important story of publishing. Out of the Kumbla was published by Africa World Press. Kasahunche Kole, who is the publisher of AWP, tells the story of meeting Carol. He was at Rutgers, she was at Binghamton, he was visiting, and in conversation, Carol told him about a collection of essays called Nambika, and Kasahun persuaded her to take a leap of faith, as he puts it, and to give him the manuscript for Nambika. AWP published Nambika, and Kasahun says that it was an incredible blessing because it launched the tremendous number of books that AWP have since published by women writers. If you know their list, you know this is true. Out of the Kumbla was an early one of that tremendous number. Kasahun says of this book that it had a very successful beginning and that it is one of the most cited books of AWP's books in the Academy. And he adds, yes, it is still in print. In this case, you should buy it from AWP if you don't own it, because it is currently retailing on Amazon for $285. We're going to have a wonderful afternoon celebrating Out of the Kumbla.
So Janice Slidell was not able to be with us, but sent a statement. And she was a contributor to this collection. She contributed an essay on Sylvia Wynter's The Hills of Hebron. This is what Janice says. I want to say thanks so much to both Carol and Elaine for letting me be a part of this historic publication 30 years ago. I am amazed that so much time has passed since those two visionary women realized the importance of what was then a little-known genre of literary criticism, that which focused on Caribbean women. The collection was one of two revolutionary works that came out the very same year. Both of these works recognized the nascent interest in the literature that had been an unrecognized part of the landscape since at least the 30s. I congratulate them for their foresight and for encouraging even more critical analyses of this important literature, especially for making the authors of so many of these works household names, at least in the halls of Africana women's studies. Names such as that of my supremely creative friend, Una Bradba, of one of my absolute favorite Caribbean women writers, Paul Marshall, of one of the very first Caribbean novelists that I've read, Sylvia Wynter, and a host of others. I was able to use this collection in my own women's literature courses, as it assisted me both to design the course and to provide secondary sources for my students. Additionally, I and my co-editor, Dr. Yakini Kemp, were able to add to the canon of womanist literary criticism when we published Arms Akimbo, African Women in Contemporary Literature. We realized then and now that we stood on the shoulders of this dynamic duo. It is a privilege and honor to be a thread in the great tapestry they began to weave 30 years ago. I regret I'm unable to celebrate this grand work as a playwright. I am being recognized with 3 virtual performances of my play that will represent the USA at the Mondial du Théâtre in Monaco. Were it not for that recognition, I would be there with you, all of you, with bells on, honoring the 30th anniversary of the publication of Out of the Kumbla. Congrats to you both, and to all of us who are permitted to tag along into history with you, sending love to you all straight from Atlanta, Georgia. And it's my honor and pleasure to introduce my absolute first professional friend, Dr. Abena Boussier. She knows why, and I know why.
In the summer of 1979, 1 year into graduate school at Oxford, I was visiting libraries in the United States with holdings of African literature and had discovered the remarkable Herzkovits Library. When wandering around the campus at Northwestern looking for a place to take my lunch break, I heard from behind a warm, lilting voice of a sister asking, "Can I help you?" and turned around to face a beautiful woman with a gap in her upper front teeth and a full head of braided hair. That embracing meeting with Janice Mays started the domino chain of encounters with remarkable scholars, now sister friends at African Literature Association conferences, that led to my first published paper in Nambika, edited by Carol Boyce Davis and Anne Adams Graves in 1986. And 4 years later, to the sister volume we celebrate today, Out of the Kumbla, edited by the same indomitable Carol Boyce Davis and Elaine Savory Fido. It is extraordinary to me, looking back over the years, how green I was and how excited I was to meet these so very awesome women that swept me up in the currents of their prescient and passionate discussions. I didn't even realize we were part of a revolution in the making. Yet, here we all are, 3 decades later, celebrating what has become a classic of Caribbean studies. Today, how we work has changed. What we read has changed. And how we read has changed. Because all of us, old and young, then and now, took up the challenge of the questions the volume raised and gave ourselves the adventure of a changed field of literature, our criticism and our theory. What a privilege and joy it's been. Congratulations to all of us.
It is my great pleasure to now introduce Carolyn Cooper, who will speak next.
Thank you, Elaine. 40 years ago, when Erna Brodber's hybrid text, Jane and Louisa Will Soon Come Home, was published.
Put your video on, Carolyn. We can't see it.
I thought it was on, sorry.
Okay, sorry. It may be on.
Isn't it on? Okay, let me just double check. Yeah, it's on.
Good.
All right. Okay, let me back, as we say in Jamaica. 40 years ago, when Erna Brodber's hybrid text, Jane and Louisa Will Soon Come Home, was published, this distinguished historical sociologist could not have anticipated that she was launching a stellar career as a creative writer. As some of you will know, Erna had set out to produce a case study in abnormal psychology for her students at the University of the West Indies, Mona, most of whom were Black and female and excluded from the textbooks they were forced to study. Erna's sister Velma, herself a creative writer, immediately recognized the literary qualities of the manuscript and initiated the process of getting it published as a novel. Over the last 4 decades, Erna has written 4 other novels: Mayal, Louisiana, The Rainmaker's Mistake, Nothing's Matte, as well as a collection of short stories, The World is a High Hill. Jane and Louisa Will Soon Come Home provides the defining metaphor for the collection of essays we are celebrating today, the Kumbla. I applaud the vision of the co-editors, Carol Boyce Davis and Elaine Savory Fido, for confidently choosing a seemingly opaque word to articulate their conception of the collection. In my essay, Afro-Jamaican Folk Elements in Brodber's Jane and Louisa Will Soon Come Home in the collection, I argue that the very obscurity of the Jamaican Creole word kumbla illuminates its paradoxical usage in the novel. And I cite the linguist Frederick Cassidy, who observes in his book Jamaica Talk that, quote, the folk speech has a special affinity, it would seem, for words involving sound play of one sort or another. There seems definitely to be something analogous to nicknaming, by which a word is not kept in its full form, but reduced in some way. Kubla is probably a reduction of calabash, which is what it means. The effect is thoroughly to disguise the source of such words, unquote. Now, this literal element of playful disguise becomes a subtle linguistic metaphor in Jane and Louisa Will Soon Come Home. The shaping of the Kumbla An act of creativity is also the art of subterfuge, a flowering of the spirit of the morally ambivalent trickster Anansi. Quote, "Your Kumbla will not open unless you rip its seams open. It is a round, seamless calabash that protects you without caring," unquote. This is a lesson that the central character Nellie must learn in order to emancipate herself from the weight of colonialist definitions of her identity. With literary sophistication and historical precision, Jane and Louisa Will Soon Come Home affirms the fertility of the gardens of women restored from deserted Kumblas. In the 3 decades since the publication of Out of the Kumbla, many more Caribbean women writers have been ripping the seams of their uncaring calabash, releasing themselves from constricting gender stereotypes, and claiming the right to self-definition. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have a video from Giovanna Covi, and I'm sure everybody who is in the audience is already learning what a rich experience it was to work with these contributors.
My thanks to Carol and Elaine for inviting me to celebrate Out of the Kumbla, a significant beginning for Caribbean literature and also for me personally. A few years prior to its publication, as a graduate student in Carol's class, my first exposure ever to African American literature, which she delivered combined with Caribbean literature, she handed me the freshly published collection of stories At the Bottom of the River by Jamaica Kincaid, saying, "I would like to know what you think of it." The reading inaugurated a critical fascination that has stuck with me all through these years. There is no work by Kincaid that has not caught my critical attention. Unforgettable in that class is also when Kamau Braithwaite came as a guest speaker. His tenor-like penetrating voice, powerfully articulated words, and intensely pronounced thinking marked the beginning of what I do not hesitate to define as my epistemic revolution. Looking back now at my oblivious beginning, I appreciate the fact that my first meeting with the Caribbean was purely literary. The year when Out of the Kumbla was published, I moved back to Italy to teach American literature. Cultivating my interest in Caribbean literature was possible here thanks to the Center for Caribbean and Diaspora Studies at Goldsmiths, University of London, founded and directed by Joan Animado. For all these years, the center has been a hotbed of creolization, a magnificent form of vital exchange and collaboration, precisely because it has always translated the literary into the political and the ethical, thus keeping Caribbean literature central to cultural issues in Europe. Affiliations thrived and theses on Caribbean studies multiplied. It should thus not surprise that Joan Animado's opera libretto Imo Inda or She Who Will Lose Her Name was published in Trento by my university in its first edition, while Jones Mango Publishing in London issued the Trento projects I coordinated on Caribbean-Scottish relations and intercultural feminist pedagogy. When Greece was devastated by the crisis, Joan and I, with Lisa Marchi, rushed to Athens to work with Mina Caravanta on the synthesis issue Perspectives from the Radical Other, because creolizing had become our tool for facing socio-political and ethical issues. Never reduced to being an academic discipline, but always presented as a practice of creolization, Caribbean literature has grown into an empowering instrument for actions of cultural resistance in Europe. In the name of this practice, seeking always new beginnings, always risking transgressions, I'm happy to celebrate Out of the Kumbla with you today. Thank you.
Okay. Elaine, I think you're on with Nancy Morhill because Sandra Cypress did not come. So Sandra Cypress, I should say, just as connecting, was an amazing colleague in Latin American studies across the hall from me at Binghamton. And she was the director of Latin American Studies program. And when she heard we were working on this book project, she was so pleased and contributed an essay titled tradition and the writings of contemporary Puerto Rican women, contemporary then. So we are really pleased that Sandra was part of this collection, and we look forward to hearing from her more in the future. Elaine.
Yes.
Introduces Nancy Morejon.
Yes, Nancy Morejon. One of the great experiences of my life was the interview with Nancy Morejon for the first Kumbla, and this event has, which has produced the video from her, came from Cuba very, very few, a little time ago. We're so pleased that we made it through to get this video, and also that she's agreed to do an interview for the next stage, the next little book that Carol and I are working on. So without more ado, let me introduce one of the great Cuban poets, Nancy Morejon.
Un abrazo y los más cordiales saludos de mi parte a Elaine Saibory y a Carol Boyce Davis por haber tenido la oportunidad, el buen gusto y el privilegio de recopilar esta antología Out of the Kumbla, que está cumpliendo 30 años de existencia. Como dice una famosa actriz andaluza, se dice fácil, pero es bien complicado haber llegado hasta aquí y que por lo menos tengamos la oportunidad de reconocer los valores de esta antología, que es una de las clásicas, de las primeras, sobre el tema de la escritura femenina en el Caribe. Así que desde aquí les mando un caluroso saludo y un abrazo bien largo, bien intenso. Greetings. I'm really excited and honored to have the possibility of welcoming and giving you these greetings for a great celebration, which is 30 years of existence of the anthology, one of the classics anthology of our times, Out of the Kumbla, done by my friends and colleagues Elaine Saibory and Carol Boyce Davis. So I think that you will be enjoying the anthology and all the talks and dialogues and colloquiums that will be around this celebration, a very inspiring celebration. So congratulations to all of you, especially for Elaine and Carol. Thank you.
What a joy to have Nancy Morejon. You all have no idea. This was not easy.
No.
She was really struggling to make sure we got it, and then she apologized because it didn't come right away. And she really wanted to be part of this, and we are so happy this worked out. Thank you, Chris and Owen, for making sure this happened, because we got this morning. Anyway, we have, one of the joys of this project.
Carol,
yeah?
I need to introduce Evelyn.
Oh, Evelyn first, okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, Evelyn was O'Callaghan, my colleague for many years at KFIL. I'm so pleased to see you here, Ev, so I will say no more.
Microphone.
Microphone.
Sorry, trying to keep to 2 minutes, no more, no less. On the top shelf of my, and you can see it there, of my disgracefully untidy home office, which is littered with books and bags of files, with boxes and bags of files from my UWI office, as yet unpacked, is a row of books. And these are my Bibles, my Caribbean women writers' Bibles, my scholarly references for the field that chose me when I joined the then English department at UWI Mona, Jamaica. Mervyn Morris gave me a copy of what Carolyn just referred to, Erna Brodber's Jane and Louisa will soon come home, and that was that. After a few years researching this writing, Betty Wilson and Pam Mordecai came out with, in 1990, I'm trying to haul it out, the groundbreaking anthology of Caribbean women's writing, Her True Name. A year later came Selwyn Cudjoe's selection of writing by authors who had read at the first conference of Caribbean women writers held at Wellesley College, which I attended along with Anthea Morrison, who was also at Cave Hill. And it was so exciting seeing everybody, hearing these writers, meeting new people. His book came out in 1990 and is called, very unsurprisingly, Caribbean Women Writers. And that same year produced Out of the Kumbla, Elaine and Carol's groundbreaking study. And this time I actually had an article in it. It was a piece on mad women in Caribbean women's literature. Earlier collections had given us access to the writers' voices, but this, very importantly, gave us access to the critics, to the reflective eye, to the discussion of this brilliant new literature that we were all learning about as we went along. And so it goes on. There was Motherlands by Sushila Nasta, published in 1991. The Woman, the Writer, and Caribbean Society, edited by Helen Pine Timothy in 1998. Caribbean Women Writers, again, edited by Mary Conde and Thorin Lonsdale in 1999. What a time. We all knew each other, we read each other's work, we reviewed and discussed the writers, we met at the same conferences, we read and wrote about all of this wonderful literature, and in just over a decade, there was a canon of their own, Caribbean women's writing. And Kumbla and Elaine and Carol were there from the start. Well done, guys.
Wow. Thank you, Evelyn. And I love that history that you put in place.
Mm-hmm.
That was really super important. Really, really nice. That chronology.
Mm-hmm.
So I was about to say excitedly that one of the joys of working on works like this is that we were able to encounter and meet writers way before they became really famous, as did Nobessie Phillip here. As everyone knows, she's a leading critic, writer, scholar, had been a lawyer, but uses all of those skills in marvelous ways in her creative work and in her intellectual and theoretical work. So we are so pleased to have had Nobessie with that early essay in Out of the Kumbla. Nobessie, please.
Greetings to all from Toronto, and congratulations to Carol Boyce Davies and Elaine Savory Fido for the work they've done over the years and for this groundbreaking work Out of Kumbla. I'm reading a paragraph from the essay that appeared in that work, which is in the collection of poetry called She Tries Her Tongue, Her Silence Softly Breaks. And I'm going to read the title, one page of the title poem, She Tries Her Tongue, Her Silence Softly Breaks. Language of the people, language for the people, language by the people, honed and fashioned through a particular history of empire and savagery. A language also nurtured and cherished on the streets of Port of Spain, San Fernando, Bossier Village, and Sangre Grande. In the Luxide and Lewi Go, in the mouths of the Calypsonians, Jean and Dinah, Rosita and Clementina, Mama Luca Bubu, the Cusbuds, the Limers, the Hoes, the Jacobats, and the market women. These are the custodians and lovers of this strange, wonderful, you think it easy, jive-ass, kick-ass, massa day done, shagaramas is we own old mass, pretty mass, pan-sweet language. A more accurate description of this language would be to call it a demotic variant of English, the Caribbean demotic. The excitement for me as a writer comes in the confrontation between the formal and the demotic within the text itself. And as I said before, from the title poem, She Tries Her Tongue, Her Silence Softly Breaks, the penultimate page. That body should speak when silence is. Limbs dance, the grief sealed in memory. That body might become tongue, tempered to speech, and where the latter falters, paper with its words, the crack of silence. That skin becomes slur, slide, susurration, polyphony and rhythm, the drum. The emptied skull, a gourd, filled with the potions of determine, that compel the split in bridge between speech and magic, force and word. The harp of accompaniment, the rib cage, strung with the taut in gut. Flute or drumstick, the bones. When silence is, abdication of word, tongue and lip, ashes of once in what was, silence, song, word, speech. Might I, like Philomela, sing, continue over into pure utterance. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nobessie. That was marvelous, as always. I just love hearing Nobessie read. And if you haven't heard her read song yet, you have to find a version of it and listen to them. It's just phenomenal. So, Elizabeth Wilson, it's lovely to see you, Elizabeth. My goodness.
Lovely to see you too, Carol.
It's been forever.
I know.
Elizabeth, we want to chat, right? But we have to work. So Elizabeth Wilson contributed an essay on Le Voyage et l'Espace Plus, Island and Journey as Metaphor, Aspects of Women's Experience in the Work of Francophone Caribbean Women Novelists. We are pleased to have you, Betty Wilson.
We've come a long, long way since 1990. I had just defended my thesis, I think it was 1985, when I met this beautiful and formidable lady at a conference, and she asked me if she could have the paper I had read for a publication that she was preparing with Elaine Savory. I was so excited, especially because she intended to put into this publication Caribbean literature, not West Indian literature, as we had before with the divisions of Francophone and Latin American or Spanish American, but Caribbean. And this had been the vision that Pam and I had for that anthology that that Evelyn just mentioned. So I was really excited. It was a groundbreaking publication out of the Kumbla. And I especially appreciated it when I taught a course for 5 years in the Department of Literatures in English called Gender and Fiction. And all the people in those courses over the 5 years, all the graduate students know about Kumbla because it was like one of our Bibles. So I'm not surprised that I looked at the ratings today, the latest ratings, still 5 stars and wonderful reviews. A 30th birthday is supposed to be traumatic, especially for women, but this one is not traumatic. Carol and Elaine can be so proud of their daughter and all the other daughters that they've launched since 1990. So congratulations, Carol and Elaine. Thank you ever so much for this publication. And I'm looking forward so much to Kumbla too. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Beautiful. So now Carol will introduce this wonderful segment on Sylvia Winter, who is presiding spirit here.
Okay, so in recent years, Winter has become one of the most compelling thinkers of Black radicalism and anti-colonial politics. a formidable critique of Western humanism and its normative configurations of human life, has revitalized philosophical debates across Black studies, critical ethnic studies, post-colonial criticism, and Black feminist theory around both the historical project of decolonization and the ontological status of Blackness in the modern world. Now, this is coming from a young scholar named Nigel Cunningham in a piece he wrote on Black metamorphosis, Sylvia Wynter's 900 pages unpublished text, which hopefully will be published soon. In short, Sylvia Wynter is considered today one of the leading theorists of the Black experience and of the theory of the human, as this applies in general to a range of theoretical positions. She's perhaps the most cited and identified of most current scholars in the fields identified earlier. But way before that, C.L.I. James noted Pan-Africanist Trotskyist in an essay published in Study Black Bridges, which I cite in the introduction to Out of the Kumbla, noted that Wynter was a, quote, intellect that surpassed by nobody in the Caribbean, unquote. Today, young scholars have to demonstrate at least a basic knowledge of the Wynter theoretics in a range of fields. A new generation weaned in graduate school and Western postmodernist readings and still finding these not able to engage Black subjectivity have the tools now to read Wynter outside of traditional orthodoxies and frameworks. But we claim her first as a Caribbean woman, writer and scholar. And in the short video that follows, we present a good selection of her work already, always, with the assumption that there's a way more that we don't know about and that will be found afterwards. Sylvia Wynter is now 94 years old this year. This is an amazing accomplishment to have lived a life so rich and so full and to be recognized at this point in her life. We honor our distinguished elder Caribbean woman, writer, and scholar. We wanted her to be here with us this evening, but it was not possible. So we will share the video of this event with her afterwards. What follows is a short video clip of her speaking. Those of you who attended the ACWWS conference in Miami in 2006 would have seen a longer version of this, but we just pulled a short clip from it. But I wanted also, for those who do not know her work enough, or others who do can be reminded to see the range of work that Wynter has contributed to intellectual fields, but also to Black communities in the world.
In every order, there's always a liminal category. That liminal category is a deviation from the norm. It is through the deviation from the norm that the rest of the society can recognize themselves as kin. For example, America is held together on the basis of whiteness. The middle class has been able to succor the lower middle classes by bonding it to itself on the fact that we are all white. And so transgender, trans race, trans everything, they are held together by the concept of white. But white is a cultural conception that is only possible as a opiate triggering reward conception by means of the degradation of Black. And by the way, for homosexual and heterosexual, it's the same. Heterosexuality also binds the lower class to the middle class and say we are all one against that scapegoat other. And by the way, this was also the role of the Jews in medieval Europe, and then later, of course, the concept of life unworthy of life, within this dangerous biological conception of the human, that there could be life unworthy of life. And then this is what is really also happening to the Blacks in the in the prison industrial complex, the price of our incorporation as middle-class blacks was their extrusion, because they now become the name of what is evil rather than the entire black population as it had been before. Somehow, the Western bourgeoisie has come to see its own physiognomic being as the only possible mode of being human.
Good evening. My name is Meredith Gadsby. I'm sorry I was waiting. I was waiting dutifully for an introduction, forgetting that it's my turn to do that. So I'm at Oberlin College in Oberlin, Ohio. And I have to say, this is an absolute feast. I was really touched, particularly by Dr. O'Callaghan's remarks, particularly the comment that you made about Caribbean literature being the field that chose you, right? I feel very much the same and feel honored to be leading a conversation with so many of my esteemed colleagues, particularly people like Marcia Douglas, who I sat across the seminar table with in many of Carol's classes. And so I'm going to start, if that's okay, because I don't dare read after Marcia Douglas, who continues to awe me in so many ways with her artistry. I remember sitting with her in graduate school in awe and wondering really what I was doing there anyway. So I was tasked with talking a little bit, as all of us are, about the importance of Caribbean literature to us. And so I have to say, I do feel that this is a field that chose me in large part because of my encounter with Out of the Kumbla. So as a graduate student, in my second year of college, I bought a book called Out of the Kumbla from a Black-owned bookseller at a book fair on campus during our weekly student union bazaar. And I had recently declared English as my major and was intrigued by the book cover and its title. I had never heard of Caribbean literature in a formal sense. I knew of it in a general sense. And I was quite aware of a rich tradition of folklore, of Caribbean folklore, because I had engaged in it as a child, right? And I was also a first-generation college student who was just kind of finding her way. A part of that journey involved spending a year as an exchange student at Spelman College. And I really became passionate about writing and reading Caribbean literature and reached out to mentors as I decided to shift my trajectory from becoming an investment banker or something that I had been told that I was supposed to be doing at college, and decided to start graduate school and pursue a degree in comparative literature. And so in an exchange between the Dean of Exchange students and other folk, I was referred to a professor named Siga Jang, who happened to be both a Spelman alum and a former student of Dr. Carol Boyce Davies. And so interestingly, I reached out to SUNY Binghamton, was directed to Dr. Boyce Davies, whom I called and who expressed great enthusiasm for working with me as a graduate student. I had forgotten at that moment, though, that this is the very same scholar whose book had been sitting on my shelf in my dorm room unread. So in 1991, I had no idea of the magnitude of the impact of Out of the Kumbla to the Field, and that it would become foundational to my early research in Caribbean literature and guide my steps towards Caribbean women's literature as both a student and a scholar. And I'm going to identify 3 key contributions that this text made or helped, to kind of guide my steps as I navigated my way through graduate school and beyond. So first, it introduced me to a uniquely feminist discourse that I had seen in practice, right, in my own family history, but never quite had the language for. So Caribbean feminist theory then, for me, offered a methodological lens that added context to my studies, right, in looking at pathways of resistance to sexism and misogyny, racism, colonialism, and many more concerns. Overtly feminist examinations of Caribbean women's lives, of course, had been offered by earlier scholars who've been mentioned here. But the foundational work of Carol Boyce Davies and Elaine Savory Fido really helped me grasp the magnitude of the work that had been created, the scholarship that had evolved both inside and outside of the region. And then the last point is that the text also showed me a way to do scholarship that made room for creativity, right? Much of my graduate experience actually was shaped by the idea that one could have a scholarly voice and a creative voice simultaneously and didn't have to sacrifice the one for the other. So I could do scholarship in a writerly way, even though I would never call myself a creative writer in a formal sense. The folklore, fable, and lyrical qualities of the way Caribbean people tell stories, right, could in fact be embedded in my scholarship. And that helped me open the door to my own intellectual imagination. And I think that was, for me, a really important moment. And so for those of us, I believe someone who spoke before spoke about the kind of a legacy in many ways of kind of intellectual daughters doing this work. And I'm proud and happy to see myself as part of that journey and that trajectory. And now I'd like to introduce Marcia Douglas, who's a sister, right, in this journey, who is at the University of Colorado Boulder.
Thank you, Meredith. My introduction to Out of the Kumbla was in 1996, I believe, in Carol Boyce Davies' Caribbean Women Writers Seminar at Binghamton. I was a grad student at the time, and at the very beginning of my journey as a writer. I recall that everything about the text, from the title to the womanist feminist essays to the cover art with the woman's arms flung in the air, seemed to invite and beckon my own emergence. And too, from the start, what I've experienced as valuable in Out of Kumbla is its formation of and function as community. So my gratitude to each of the writers in this collection. Your dialogue helped set my own voice in motion. Out of the Kumbla is dedicated to the many unsung Caribbean women who write, sing, tell stories, and struggle to make their voices heard. And voice and community is something that I have sought to explore and honor in my own work as a fiction writer, whether it be a grandmother come back from the dead to have her say, hear her. Me don't have no name. Everybody forget it. And now not even me can remember it. It happened like that to plenty of we sow and plant and cook and sweep and wash and scrub and reap and stir and cry and pray and bend over and scream and break we back, then hold it straight again to send the children to school with piece of pencil so they can learn to write the book of we story and never forget it. I heard the babies crying in my grave, my grands and my grands' grands, and how could I not return? Or the voice of a dancehall queen, hear her. Me's a dancehall rebel woman, is a rebel dance me a dance for if you look the moves good, you see is Africa them come from. Is them kind of thing we need tell the people. or the voice of a young girl, Angela, making connections to her herstory. Hear her. Remember the baby mothers who were forced to jump off the ships? Sometimes I hear their children calling, Mama! Here's what I know. When I call your name, my voice is their echo. Or fierce Rasta woman Lena. Hear her. The lions in my dream are queens in control of their knowing. I imagine them Rasta sisters, their head wrapped in Zion cloth. They know what they know, and that knowing grounds them, sustains them. Or Lena's mother, Sister Vaughn, hear her. I dwell betwixt and between, and no evil shall overcome Shilion. You see me? I hold my neck proud and balance Jaja ark on top, I and I head. Watch yourself, is woman time now. Thanks and blessings, everyone.
Thank you, Marcia. And now we'll hear from Thomas Glave.
Ashe, gratitude. And so indeed, out of the Kumbla they came, those women, out of the fields where they had labored for centuries, as they had labored in the valleys and on the mountainsides and on the mountaintops and beneath and on top of the everlasting, vast, island-filled woman's sea. Rising into the sky from that woman's sea and everywhere, rising across the very firmament, they linked hands, those women, and so decided then and there, opening their palms and their very flesh to the stars, to gather voices, one of them said, and stories, proclaimed another. Voices, stories, lives. And so began the fateful events that would change the future world for all time, when those women reached their very long hands up from the sea and down from the sky and the stars and cast their nets to become fishers of stories, fishers of voices, voices and stories from within and beneath and beyond the great, vast woman sea of primordial time. And so it came to pass that some in the future world were heard to say to the women, but we never knew. To which the women fishers and the woman voices responded, yes, you never knew because you never looked. And so not looking, you never saw. And so not seeing, you never imagined. And so not imagining, you never heard. And so not hearing, you never thought. All of which carried you on tattered wings back to the sad desert of not knowing, where, bereft even of your tattered wings, you remained all the poorer, unable to join us in reaching the stars, unable to join us in plumbing the depths, the deep, deep depths of the great woman sea and all its islands. And so, as might have been foretold in the early days of the most primordial woman stars, out of the Kumbla and out of dreams and out of the dreams of dreams they came, out of the great vast sea and the secrets clutched in hands, clasped between darkness and light. The woman voices that gradually, over time, over 30 years, or over 2021 years, would change, would reshape the form of the very planet and change the face even of the kingly sun. The woman voices that would fill the air beyond even the firmament. The woman voices of the Kumbla, the voices out of the Kumbla, the spreading woman land beneath their feet, and always, always, always the sky. Thank you.
So beautiful. You see, want to see now why I went and got my stuff out of the way. So it's not to embarrass myself. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much, Thomas. Next, we'll hear from Erica Johnson.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. I'm just grateful to be here with all of you, and all of you have inspired me. And Out of the Kumbla was a milestone for me in my graduate studies in the 90s. I was in comparative literature. I was taking courses in African diasporic studies and women's literature and Francophone literature. And then when I was doing a presentation on Maryse Condé, I picked up Out of the Kumbla, and there I encountered in a single volume what made Cohere what I had been working toward, one seminar paper at a time. The book was a resource, a powerful aggregation, and an affirmation. And the first course I designed in my teaching career was Caribbean Women Writers, guided entirely by Out of the Kumbla. The volume illustrated writ large the vital role of criticism in articulating and amplifying creative expression, of giving voice not where it was silent to cite the editor's opening comments, but where it was unheard. And this kind of vocalization is the product of a critical approach that is as coextensive with this subject as possible. Method itself is reconfigured by reparative critical writing that models the space of possibility, that is not burdened by strategies that just break down and debunk. Out of the Kumbla gestures toward a mutual vitality of creative and critical work and the fluidity of its genres, and in particular in the iterative nature of its internal complexity. Literary work, as with historical event, is received into patterns of recognition that can at best mirror and enable, and that is what this volume does. The iterative nature of Kumbla's essays and bibliographies sets in motion an ongoing project of appreciation for a body of profoundly intersectional literature that continues to flourish and to prompt new modes of thought. Out of the Kumbla convenes a conversation between literature and criticism as warm and compelling as the dialogue with which its editors, Carol Boyce Davies and Elaine Savory, open this groundbreaking book. And for that, and for all of you, I am deeply grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erica. It was lovely. And now we'll hear from Anu Lakan.
Hi, thank you so much. This is my thank you and happy anniversary and happy birthday card to Out of the Kumbla. So Caribbean women writing is not something I think about very consciously very often, because those three words essentially underpin my everyday world. I'm Caribbean and a woman, and I write. And those are perhaps the only three things in my life that I've never had to question. So when I came to Kumbla, what I found was friendship and understanding and standing on the ground I would grow on. It was not only the scholarship, though that was a huge thing, but it was also the spirit of conversation. And I think that either Elaine or Carol mentioned this earlier, people talking about the importance of conversation in the text itself, because it's in the actual format, it's used in the front matter of the book. But it was also at a time when demented and slightly terrified undergraduate students were engaged in the business of discussion with each other and our lecturers and tutors, and the essays were great help. And I feel like now that we've lost so much of that, it's even more important than ever to remember what Kumbla gave us. It was also the time, as a demented and desperate student, of the big reveal about which ones of us were already familiar with some Caribbean literature, and who were the ones who thought that Naipaul was the only Caribbean writer. Merle Hodge, Z. Edgehill, Pauline Melville, Jamaica Kincaid, Olive Sr. were already beloved by me. I was becoming increasingly obsessed with Michelle Cliff and falling in love with Ina Broadbent and Pam Mordecai. And Pam, I'm thinking of you now. And this incredible, amazing creature called Edwidge Danticat was just happening at that very, very moment. I was one of the lucky ones. My mother had kept me on a steady Caribbean diet from whenever it was she'd started reading to me. My mother read everything I read. She did not go to university, but she had read more Caribbean literature than any student I knew and just marginally less than my professors. And everything I was reading, most of it Caribbean, much of it female-centered, she also read. And I marveled at her ability to have resisted being like other people who didn't care about Caribbean literature and who didn't want to know what things meant. More than anything, when I met Kumbla and started reading criticism of women's writing, it felt like taking great mammoth gulps of air, except the air was language and ideas. It was like coming out of catatonia, where you were aware of what was going on around you, but you could not speak or touch or interrupt the surface in any way. But with this new and marvelous thing, writers talking about the woman from my world, I could breathe a little easier. It had, after all, it turns out, never been a sign of madness that I believed in the sound and stories of Caribbean women was not merely important, but essential. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to each of you. I think it looks like we are at 7:20 in the program.
Yes, Meredith, you actually have a little bit of time for a little chat if anyone wants to ask a question.
That's exactly what I was going to invite. And so are there any questions? Is there anything that anyone would like to share or respond to any of these presenters?
Or if the presenters want to respond to each other as well.
Right. Well, I want to start by thanking Marcia and Thomas. I feel in so many ways like the Binghamton posse has rolled so deep, even when we don't see each other. I want to thank you both as well for your remarks, particularly the way that you wrapped so much love around honoring the text itself. Could you, and this is obviously a question for everyone, but could you talk to us a bit about how the kind of theoretical work that you engaged in and did, right, when you encountered the text informed your creative writing?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, I encountered the book in Dr. Boyce Davies' Caribbean Writers course. I think it was around 1996, something like that. And from the very beginning in those days, I was interested in community. And as a creative writer, how to explore, capture something of the notion of community on the page. And so when this book came to me, I think it was Evelyn who referred to it as a Bible. I experienced it in that sort of way too. The book itself is a community, but also there's something of the book which has spawned further community and community building. And so I really connected with the book in that sort of way. And it gave me permission. It carved a space for me, but it also gave me permission to spawn communities of my own on the page as a fiction writer. So that's the sort of conversation that I've seen myself having with the book, is this sort of ongoing dialogue.
Thomas, would you like to respond?
The book makes the world just much bigger because that's what it does. It shows how much bigger the world is than we might be led to believe. And it becomes part of dreams. And then if you dream with it, then when you wake up in the morning, you can breathe a bit easier as you go through the day, because you know that it's possible to breathe. I think that's the best thing I can say in terms of your question. That would answer it.
Thank you.
I was wondering about Anu's mother. That is such an amazing story. Your mom knowing almost as much as the profs and reading it along with you. That is to cherish, really. And I just wanted to say something about that.
Thank you. She was extraordinary in that way.
Did you,
I'm
sorry.
You had conflict when you went to school and you knew more.
Say that again?
Did you have any conflict when you went to school because you probably knew more than the teacher?
But I'm sure there were many, many reasons, so much better reasons than just knowing things, to have been in conflict with my teachers. And I think maybe one of the biggest ones was and it wasn't just teachers, it was fellow students, and it was that big thing. There was almost a pride in not knowing Caribbean literature, in saying, oh, I only ever read Miguel Street, or I only ever read Christopher. And somehow, of all the books in the world, Christopher is the book that everyone seemed to have read when they had read no other Caribbean literature. And I just thought, well, one, I'm really, really sorry for you. Two, I wish you had my mother. And three, do something about it and realize that this is not a source of pride. You're in a West Indian seminar, and you need to fix that. So
that's wonderful. I heard it. You were going to say something.
No, I just briefly, I love that comment about the cultivation of community. There are so many academic texts that can feel so alienating, right? And that cultivation of community that was just mentioned, Anu, it sounds like you were talking about that as well, where the text draws you in to this conversation. And I wonder if you, and then Erica would like to talk a bit about how you felt drawn in, right? Okay. And then encouraged.
There's a question, really great question from the audience, which we'll take.
Oh, great. Okay, great.
Could we just let Anu and Erica respond to that, and then we'll
that's what I do after. Yeah. I was just alerting them.
The way the text was shaped from the very start, from the front matter right through, it was not this remote and hard to access kind of academic text that I was accustomed to seeing. And I guess even more important than that, it was talking about the things that I had been talking to myself about in my head for such a long time. And so the community was, yes, I mean, I had some amazing, wonderful tutors and lecturers. But it was also feeling like I was in active conversation with the people who were writing the essays. The people who were writing the essays were also writing poems, and they were writing novels, and they were writing other essays. So having all of these conversations was a huge community building exercise for me, and knowing that it didn't have to come from people I was sitting next to. It was people writing a whole book away.
Yeah, the conversational, I use the term iterative, but it's the conversation. It's the opening conversation is so warm, and it invites the reader in. And then there's this conversational nature between creativity and criticism. I was a student of literature. Of course, I worshiped literature. And then when I discovered the volume, I then realized the power of criticism too, and the extent to which criticism and literature are working together. And I really appreciated what Professor Gatsby was saying about finding creativity in the critical, and how they're not as separate entities, but this ongoing dialogic nature of the critical and the creative was something that really came to me through this volume. That one.
Wonderful. So there's a question: how has Islam had any influence in Caribbean literature? What is the state of Caribbean women's literature now in terms of university, American academia? In other words, where is it taught? What space is it granted in English departments?
It's a huge question. I know that I have, it's 3 questions. So the last one, I have never taught in an English department. It's terrible to say I've had the pleasure of never having taught in an English department, which is why I chose comparative literature, and was educated by a group of Black women scholars who encouraged me to see the gaps and fill them. And so my approach has always been incredibly intrusive, in that I create the courses and I teach the courses, without apology. And so the idea of space being made is a challenging one, because it seldom is. And I think we were encouraged to create that space by texts such as this.
That's a good question for Thomas, too, teaching in an English department. How welcoming is American academia to Caribbean women's writing today? Or what space is there in the departments?
I think, Carol, in my experience, that in Binghamton, at SUNY Binghamton, I think right now still the issue really is, as I've said to you before in conversation, that we have not a competition, but a sort of overshadowing of Latin American women writing, Latin American women writers, who are seen, if they're from Cuba, the Dominican Republic, etc., right, as being the Caribbean because of our student population. And so Anglophone and Francophone Caribbean women writers, whom I have taught at Binghamton in 3 different courses, are not necessarily as visible to the students unless it's someone like Jamaica Kincaid, who is very anthologized, or someone, there are various people, right? But in terms of fiction writers and poets, this is still very much an uphill battle, which is why this book is clearly 30 years later still so important, still so germane, because we have to really work to get this work visible to people. And as we are in conversation with women in Latin America and the Latin American parts of the Caribbean as well.
Okay. What about you, Erica? Do you have, in your teaching situation, where does it fit?
Our curriculum, I'm in an English department, but I also identify deeply with comparative literature. I don't identify as having done my paces through any kind of English curriculum. I never have. So I'm in an English department where we have recently redone the curriculum so that it is incredibly capacious. And we are finding welcoming ways to bring in, my Caribbean courses, my colleagues' courses. We're a very flexible and nimble department right now, I would say, for an English department. But we've had to do that work in the last 5 years, I would say. We redid the curriculum to make it more welcoming, shall we say.
Wonderful. So I think we close off this section. Thank you so much, Meredith Gadsby, for super work in pulling this conversation together, And we turn over to the next conversation with Miriam Moyes, which Elaine will introduce.
Thank you, Carol. We're doing beautifully for time. Everyone is being so good. It's so rich. So we'll come back to those questions at the end. So conversation 3 is Kumbla and the generational and global reach of Caribbean women's writing. And Miriam Moyes will moderate. Thank you, Miriam.
Thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me well. So my name is Miriam Moyes. I'm Associate Professor of English and Gender Studies at the Université des Antilles in Martinique. Listening to all the previous remarks from so many distinguished writers and scholars praising Out of the Kumbla is such an amazing moment, and I'm thrilled and honored to take part in this live event. Out of the Kumbla has greatly contributed to my self-awareness and growth as a young Caribbean woman. Yes, I have grown with the Kumbla. I came across Out of the Kumbla 10 years after its publication in the year 2000, when I started my Erasmus year in London. I was 20 at the time, and by then I had read several pieces of creative writers from Merlodge, Maryse Condé, or Nancy Moret-Cron. So really Caribbean women writers from across the Caribbean region. At North London University, on the very first day, one of the modules called Caribbean Women Writers, taught by a lecturer and now a dear friend, and I'm sure she's listening at the moment, Dr. Rita Christian, she attracted our attention on the main objective of the course, which was to explore theoretical approaches to the analysis of Caribbean women's writing. On this first class, she came with several books, but she brandished her copy of Out of the Kumbla and stated, this should be your reference book for critical analysis on Caribbean women's literature. It will be key to your understanding. At the end of the class, my Guadeloupean friend Karine and I rushed to the bookshop New Beacon in Finsbury Park to get our copies of Out of the Kumbla. And this became our favorite class. But as the only French Caribbean students in this class, we were often approached with regards to our own authors. Were Martinican and Guadeloupean women's voices heard at home and abroad? In fact, at the time, I could easily refer to works by Aimé Césaire, France Fanon, and other major Martinican male writers, but I still struggled to name a major Martinican woman writer at the time, while my friend Karine could easily refer to Maryse Condé or Gisèle Pineau or Simone Schwarz-Barth, all women from Guadeloupe. So even now, in my own critical work, when I talk about the Negritude women, like Martinican women, Suzanne Césaire and the Nardal sisters, whose voices were not fully acknowledged and valued at the time, I feel that the definition of voicelessness in Out of the Kumbla continues to resonate today. Only recently have these Martinican women writers started to receive actual recognition at home and abroad. In Out of the Kumbla, CBD and Ellen Savory strongly denounce the absence of a specifically female Caribbean voice. While the absence of female points of view is arguably no longer relevant today, I would say that we should, in fact, continue to celebrate Out of the Kumbla for paving the way for generations of scholars in Caribbean women's literature who still strive to make their voices heard and to make all Caribbean women's voices audible worldwide and from every corner of Caribbean spaces. So I'm very glad to be part of this generation of the Kumbla daughters and to raise my voice from the Caribbean and from Martinique in particular. And as we continue our celebratory journey, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce one of my favorite Jamaican poetess and head of the UWI Institute of Gender and Development Studies, Opal Palmer Edisa. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Miriam. And I just want to say tremendous congratulations and thank you to Carol and Elaine for this amazing collection that I'm a part of. How do I keep them safe? Kenise Jackson, 20 years old, murdered, body dump. Jasmine Dean, slightly impaired US student, abducted and missing since the end of 2019. This list is endless. Women and girls raped, bodies burned, mutilated, tossed like rubbish in empty lots. How do I keep them safe? And what does it say about our development if, despite all our efforts, gender-based violence is on the rise? How do I keep them safe? Perhaps we need to get back inside the Kumbla, seek to erect walls of protection forever for every girl and woman. How do I keep them safe? What strategies do I need to employ? How does the community of women writers help us to do more than shed light on these outrageous crimes? The duppy of Kenise Jackson wants to know. The father of Jasmine Dean wants to know. The writer, cultural activist me want to know how the voices of Caribbean women writers have gained world recognition. And many of us write and document and illuminate these plight, these inequities, these femicides, these acts of misogyny, these patriarchal crimes. So how do I make my words heal? How do I turn my words into medicine? How do I make my words have the power beyond the page? Fix those men who beat, punch, berate, strangle, mutilate. How do I keep my sisters safe? How do we as women writers in this community help
I am a woman with daughters. I have many friends with daughters. I feel vulnerable sometimes, alone, fearful. So tell me, what am I not seeing? How do I prevent another Kenise Jackson from being murdered and body dumped in a lot? How do I keep another 3-year-old girl like Novelisa Campbell from being raped and asked to death? How do I keep the hundreds and millions of women in Jamaica and Trinidad and Barbados and all throughout the Caribbean and the world safe? How do I eliminate femicide? How do I eliminate rape? How do I eliminate rage and fear? How many more words to make powerful, to prevent, to correct, to neutralize, to heal? What are the words I struggle for? What are the words that fix this situation? What are the words in the Kumbla that Caribbean women writers have been using? How? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was very powerful and very deep. I will now invite well-known writer and Professor Ramabai Espinet to take the floor. Right, maybe I should invite, right? Let me now then move swiftly.
Oh, she's there.
She's there?
Yeah,
okay.
She's there.
Perfect.
Yeah. She needs to unmute, that's all.
Okay, unmute.
Okay. It's not strange the language we use now, unmute.
Unmute.
Right?
Well, hello. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to say congratulations to Out of the Kumbla and to you both, Elaine and Carol Boyce. Well done. Out of the Kumbla is alive and sparkling 30 years later. So its birthday party is deservedly la grande affaire, as it should be. I think of its time of arrival 30 years ago, when the Caribbean women's movement was just exploding, and we used to sing only half-jokingly, "Woman time a come," at the end of every event. It was the end of the UN Decade for Women in 1985, an era that gave us activists such as Lucille Mayer and, of course, the perennial Peggy Antrobus, who was at its fore. And always there was Sylvia Winter, whom you so aptly celebrated tonight. Kafra and Wand came into being at that time. And there was a spontaneous overflow of women's poetry, as they categorized it at that time, which led in 1990 to the publication of Creation Fire, the Kafra anthology of Caribbean women's poetry, which I am proud to have edited. So many firsts at that auspicious time, not to mention the amazing collective energy. Over the years, as writers, scholars, and teachers, we have all utilized the groundbreaking essays and concepts of the many contributors who have all, including you two, added more works to the Caribbean's and the world's storehouse of knowledge. So I say thank you, and to Out of the Kumbla, Sindabad. Long life.
Thank you so much. I would now invite Yomera Figueroa, an Afro-Puerto Rican writer. The floor is yours.
Thank you all so much. This has been an honor to be in the presence of all of you and to listen to your words. I'm going to read a quick piece that I wrote in relation to this event. Out of the Kumbla is one of the first publications to tend to Caribbean women's writings as critical feminist contributions. It begins with urgency, quote, "Sometimes it is important to be personal," end quote. A call for us to engage and consider our subjective experiences in our efforts to create modes of understanding our lives and living. In doing so, it renders visible the farce of objectivity and even universality in the creation of literature and scholarship. The preface, a dialogic essay between Professors Boyce Davies and Savory, traces their approach to Caribbean thought, feminisms, womanism, and identity. One part that resonated with me was Carol's experience of reading and studying African and Caribbean literature in the moment in which she reads Merle Hodge's Crick Crack, a book that spoke directly to her life. That moment where in the supposed objective world of books, we are touched by a text that speaks to our living, to our memories, to our kin, to our whole selves. We could not only read the work, but think about it and be critics of it. Out of the Kumbla contends with women's voicelessness, as silences, as lack of access, as unheard, as absence, and I would add as disappeared, as femicide, as invisibilized, as peripheralized. Out of the Kumbla attends to how Caribbean women speak into these silences. It is a work that engages storytelling, criticism, poetry, literary historiography, and quilted narratives, suturing seemingly fragmented stories and histories, snippets of nourishment, sustenance, growth, struggle, pain, and triumphs. By enunciating the silences, Out of the Kumbla becomes a demonic ground, a space outside of the presented consolidated fields, the current modes of being, feeling, and knowing, and outside of the overrepresentation of these models as the sum of the human. Sylvia Wynter's Afterword offers us a generous space through which to consider the work of Caribbean women and feminists and womenist politics. As the volume wrestles with silences by illuminating the rewriting and the self-redefinition of those radically othered, it acts upon the world and turns away from the, quote, chaos roles these subjects have been assigned. Throughout Out of the Kumbla, Caribbean women writers name themselves Caribbean, name themselves writers, critics, makers, feminists, womanists, and so on. Wynter's emphasis on the radical potential of the Studia Humanitatis offers a first step towards a new science of the human. In short, the word is critical, and Out of the Kumbla is the word, a word. And just a brief personal note, I want to move on to talking a little bit about Puerto Rican literature. And since the publication of Out of the Kumbla, there has been an explosion of Afro-Puerto Rican literature and published works by Black women from throughout the Spanish-speaking Caribbean and the diasporas. I'm thinking about the work of Ángela María Dávila, Mayra Santos Febres, Yolanda Arroyo Pizarro, Araceli Germay, Amina Gautier, Marie Ramos Rosado, and others. We owe so much to Out of the Kumbla, especially those of us who came up learning and loving Caribbean literature. This volume offered us the opportunity to feel and to know that Caribbean women's literature is a fact. Furthermore, Out of the Kumbla is part of the radical feminist practice of tending to each other's material contributions, pulling one another out of obscurity, and preserving a spirit of love and fury for future generations. I was a small child when Out of the Kumbla was published, 6 years old. And now, as a scholar and professor and writer of Caribbean literature and Afro-diaspora studies, I am honored, beyond honored, to be in continued conversations with these visionary editors and contributors. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It is now my pleasure and honor to invite Rinaldo Walcott, professor in the Women and Gender Studies Institute at the University of Toronto, to take the floor.
Thank you. Elaine Savory and Carol Boyce Davies, thank you. Thank you very much for this work. This is a kind of reminiscence. This winter in my grad course, Black Diaspora Feminist Intellectual Traditions, we began by reading Horton Spiller's Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, Saidia Hartman's Venus in Two Acts, and Sylvia Wynter's Beyond Miranda's Meanings. Of course, the essay, The Afterword from Out of the Kumbla. Reading Wynter alongside these others opens up new avenues for thinking the problem of gender, woman, and Blackness. I return to this collection often as a guide to expand my thinking beyond North America and to put North America in tension with other Blacknesses. Out of the Kumbla arrived just as I began graduate school in 1990. Having just completed an undergraduate degree in literature at York University that was filled with as much Caribbean literature and culture courses as I could get. Our professors had alerted us to the anthology's arrival. My final course was a Caribbean women writers course, and off to grad school I went. Once in grad school, Out of the Kumbla was a welcome oasis from the debates and fights between the Black post-structuralists like Gates and the Black Afrocentrics like Asante. Out of the Kumbla offered other modes of theorizing, and it allowed me as a grad student to think about how to build a Caribbean intellectual tradition into my master's work, and definitively so into my doctoral dissertation study. In fact, the anthology had and has had such an impact on me, and that I would reference it so often that a colleague of Carl Boyce Davies, both of them at SUNY Binghamton then, but she was visiting Professor Oisey where I went to school, promised to introduce me to Carol. Deborah Brixman delivered on that introduction, and Carol eventually ended up being the external examiner for my dissertation in 1995. And after, she, Carol, became my academic guide, champion, mentor, and someone who I took inspiration from as a young professor. Out of the Kumbla has been influencing me even when it does not appear to be explicitly so. The essays open up for me not just relief from the debate mentioned earlier, but the essays also give me a pathway to eventually take up queer sexuality too. A younger, precocious me even wrote an essay called Out of the Kumbla, Toni Morrison's Jazz and Pedagogical Answerability, that was published in the journal Cultural Studies in 1995. This was during my Bactinian period. It was also how the anthology helped me to bridge the Caribbean and North America, in particular Canada, what I have consistently been trying to do in my work since then. So thank you for this work that continues to endure across intellectual periods and fields. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rinaldo. This is now my pleasure to introduce the last speaker of this section. In fact, Donna Asa Ware Soleil is an associate professor of English at Florida International University and the incoming president of the Caribbean Women Writers and Scholars Association. This is over to you now, Donna Asa Ware Soleil. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yes, hi. Congratulations, Dr. Saber-Fido. Congratulations, CBD. Out of the Kumbla is no longer womanish. Out of the Kumbla, a bigger man. Bigger man. So big up on yourself. Big up on yourself. This is a wonderful moment. When I was asked to say a few words in celebration of Out of the Kumbla's 30th anniversary, it was a Sankofa moment for me to reflect on my own academic journey. A timely convergence of opportunity, luck, and a Mellon undergraduate fellowship had led me to the OCA summer school program at Oxford University in 1989, where I met Dr. Boyce Davies and the program's co-organizer, Professor Abina Busia. Dr. Boyce Davies was the instructor for my Caribbean Women Writers seminar. I also met Professor Carolyn Cooper, who was a visiting lecturer from the University of Birmingham. All three helped to inaugurate my transformation from undergraduate student to undergraduate student and New York City spoken word poet to PhD graduate student and now associate professor of English. When Out of the Kumbla was published a year later, for me, it was more than just the unsilencing of the demonic grounds of Caliban's woman, so brilliantly explicated in Sylvia Wynter's Afterword. Some of the creative ideas and critical theories I had been exposed to for the first time that summer were cogently inscribed in this collection. Carolyn Cooper's essay on Erna Brodber's representation of Afro-Jamaican women and Rhonda Cobham's analysis of women in Jamaican literature transformed me from that awkward admixture of rural Jamaican country girl and fly girl from Queens, New York, to Afro-Jamaican woman and aspiring scholar with deep roots, a rich culture, and a bright and possible future. The introduction and preface to the collection, along with Professor Boyce Davies's essay on women in Caribbean oral literature, were to become my critical anchors in graduate school at Berkeley. Together, the works in this collection constituted major sources of diaspora literacy that Professor Veva Clark's essay assured me I would need before I could fully understand and prepare for my life's work ahead. Later, I would collaborate with Professor Clark on displaying the works on African spirituality that were in the UC Berkeley archives. Thanks to Out of the Kumbla, I already knew Veve's work before I met her. Similarly, before I had read anything by Simone Schwartz-Bart, I had already been introduced to her Gifts of Metaphor in the Bridge of Beyond by Professor Abina Busia, and immediately went in search of more. I read Professor Elaine Savory's essay, Finding a Way to Tell It, in Out of the Kumbla, and found out from Carolyn Cooper on my next trip to Jamaica where the Sistine Theatre Collective was located, and actually went there to find them because of Professor Savory's work. And that's where I bought my first copy of Lionheart Gal. Out of the Kumbla was an invitation to my own emergence from the chrysalis of barely formed, unarticulated, and as yet inarticulable dreams of the self I desired and did not know I could become, an inscription on the path I could take to get to that self. Leading by example and setting the bar high, the editors and contributors and their unsung muses helped me to see that I did not need to choose from among a cornucopia of options for my life and career path. I could be poet, scholar, fiction writer, wife, mother, professor. All of those things were available to me because they and their unsung muses had made it possible for me to imagine my own possibilities. Congratulations, Carol and Elaine. Ashe, ashe, ashe. I am looking forward to Out of the Kumbla too.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much.
You. So we hope everybody can come back live so we can see you before we get ready to close off. That would be so lovely.
This we have a surprise.
Event. We have a surprise. So that's coming next. That's why we wanted everybody to be open. Okay. A few more. Myra, I see. Anyway, we don't want to spend too much time. So basically we want to, this has been so joyful. And what I want to say though is my dear colleague Elaine is retiring from university teaching this June. So this is a fitting, lovely send-off for you, Elaine. I didn't even think of it like that until now.
Thank you, Carol, but I am retiring to write.
Right.
I am not retiring, period.
Right. That's why I said retiring from teaching.
Yes.
This is a fitting send-off. Anyway, so
Thank you.
And just want to say one thing. Their generation, this really makes it dates one. There are generations of grad students I had. I want to say Ronaldo is in that first tier because I was at a conference at the MLA and this young graduate student came chasing after me with another friend. I forgot his name. You need to tell me his name. And say, oh my God, we saw that book and we want to talk to you. And that was amazing. And they were like blown away with Sylvia Winter. It's through Ronaldo that you get Captain McKittrick and all the other people who follow and have all this theoretical elaborations that they do now. But that's Ronaldo. So I just need to say that publicly right now. He's like first generation grad student. Thank you, Ronaldo, for taking time out and being here. And okay, so Chris, we can go to our final lovely greetings surprise that we got today.
Hello, Carol and Elaine. Happy anniversary on Out of Kumbla, Caribbean Women in Literature. What a fantastic gift you gave us as Caribbean women, writers, thinkers, feminists, womenists. Thank you for talking it over with us as the book starts out, to surveying our literature and allowing us to explore these voyages and espace clos, and really teaching us and helping us in the next generation to figure out how to write home as well as the places where we are now. Congratulations on this wonderful milestone of a book. Waiting for a reprint. I would love to see more, the book out there everywhere, and more. I want to find it to give to my niece, for example, who heads to college in the fall, so that we can know our really powerful past and really examine these both the presences and the absences that brought us here. Thank you for your spirit of place. Thank you for your spirit of witnessing and of creating these documents for us that help us to look back, but also look forward. Thank you. And congratulations on the celebration and this wonderful anniversary.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was Edwidge Nandikat, and we are overjoyed. We are so overjoyed. And she was on the road to North Carolina, and she really stopped on the way to make sure she could find a way to send us a video. I am so thankful to her for taking that time out. So I don't know, Chris, do we have time for more discussion among people if there are any comments, or should we just go to closure? Are there any burning questions or comments people want to make? Know that we've all met and seen each other. I think maybe that's the way to phrase it. I think Chris said he will give us a few more minutes. Now Bessie is here too. And then we wanted to at least toast, and now Bessie said she's going to get her drink.
Yes.
I know. So maybe that's what we should do at this point. We want to toast out of the Kumbla. Oh, wow. People do have glasses.
Yeah.
Right. This is so lovely.
A toast.
30 years
A toast to contributors, to all of us, but also all of our audience who are out there that we can't see. So let's just celebrate Caribbean women's writing in every possible dimension.
Wonderful. Wow, I'm happy to see all these glasses. Thomas is
We were obedient.
Thomas is drinking water. Come on, Thomas. It's messed up. Okay, so what I want to say is Department of Literature is in English at Cornell University. We want to thank you for hosting this, especially Aurora Ricardo, Paula Epps Sapero, and our amazing chair, Caroline Levine. To Chris Wofford and staff at eCornell, especially Owen Passage, and Owen, hope I said your name right, and Caitlin Wilson, who we work with on this event with so many movable parts, as you can tell. The contributors, the speakers, the audience, shout outs to people all over the world who are in the audience. Peter Wayne Lewis, I know you're there. Wesley Critchlow told me he was going to be here. I said, I'm going to give him a shout out. And the Caribbean Students Association for their request for more formalized Caribbean studies, Courage. Meredith Gatsby and Miriam Moise, thank you for leading the second and third conversations. And I had such faith and trust because I kind of know who they are. I kind of raised them. I kind of knew they were going to represent. Writers like Edwidge Nandikat, who went out of their way to send greetings. Castle Whole of Africa World Press. Sylvia Winter for everything.
Yes.
Billy Gerdes for video help. All who made this evening possible. I just want to say thank you so much. Carolyn Cooper, I'm so glad you're here. And everybody else. What else have I left out? Anybody wants to say anything else, please do, and then we will thank
Carol, I just want to say I really meant what I said in my recording. You know, it's been such a wonderful journey. And, you know, arriving from England at the time I did and meeting you all, you really had no sense of the nature of the journey. You were just like having fun, meeting people, doing your work. And it's incredible to turn around 30 years later and realize, actually, you were part of the first in this and the first in that. And, you know, producing the work and also helping produce the students who go on to carry on that work. And it's really kind of astonishing. You know, I handed in my formal retirement papers earlier on. I become emerita on the 1st of January of next year. And it's kind of nice to be part of something like this that helps you remember the journey, helps you remember what you did and who you did it with and who discovered you and who read and who, like, really appreciated the legacy that you helped to create. I feel like crying, you know, it's just extraordinary. So thank you. Thank you to the two of you, because this has been special, and it's been special to remember the journey. Really has. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to say a great thank you to all of our panelists and everyone, including you, Abby, for the generosity of the contributors to this volume in the beginning, and the generosity of everyone who's come to support the volume today is astonishing to me and deeply moving. I'm sure to Carol as well. So, it's been a most amazing event. Now, all we have to do is we have to face the task of not losing touch again.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Can I just briefly say that I want to underscore the point I made in my little contribution, that you guys really were courageous to put Kumbla in the title of this book, because most people look, what the hell is Kumbla?
I know.
In a way, what you were doing was signifying the importance of the local, the particular, the language, and making us confront that notion of why is it that the language that we use always has to be determined by outsiders? Why can't we use our own Creole, our own folk discourses? So I just want to reinforce that point, that it was visionary of you guys to say. And I'm surprised that Casahun went along with it out of the Kumbla. What is this? Who is going to buy this book? What do they know about the damn Kumbla? But you have made it a household name in academia. So big up on the status.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Carolyn.
Hi, this is Meredith. If it's okay, I'd like to say that one of the things I really appreciated about the moment I encountered the book and fast forwarding into this moment now is that for many of us as graduate students, we were taught the importance of building our own institutions. That was something that I learned postgraduate school that many graduate students were not encouraged to do. In fact, that most people were hazed and not encouraged. They were in fact discouraged and left their graduate experiences really bitter. And so I want to thank all of you, especially Elaine and Carol, for modeling for us the possibility for something else, because we've been able to pay that forward with our own students and to bring people in. And for me, that's one of the most important aspects of my graduate experience, but also my approach to teaching, my pedagogy. And it reinforced my love for Caribbean literature, specifically Caribbean women's literature. So thank you. 30 years and 30 more and 30 more and 30 more.
And the 30 years is going to be y'all. Because
yeah,
so
your grand student.
No, Bessie, she's live now. I really want to hear her voice.
Yes, really. She needs to unmute.
Yes, she did. She was. It's not unmuted, no, Bessie.
Yep.
Yeah, we got you.
My comment was wonderful to see these queens.
Yeah.
And I mean that in every sense of the word. Carolyn.
Yes, girl.
Sister, do you remember Germany? And the taxi driver?
No, I'm an old man. I can't remember all them things. Tell me about Germany and the taxi. What did you do to the taxi driver? What did the taxi driver do to me?
Yeah. He tried to rip us off. And you got out and you let go a scream. And he ran to his car, jumped in, and drove off. I have dined out in that story many times, Carolyn. Oh, it's just, Abner, I haven't seen you in ages, I think. I don't know.
I am in Ghana.
Ghana was.
You look so beautiful.
Yeah, it's
wonderful. No, Bessie, the last time I saw you, you were here.
Oh, in the US?
No, in Ghana.
In Ghana? Uh-huh.
On Zoom, at the invitation of Kofi Anidoho.
That's right. That's right.
That was the last time we saw each other.
Yeah.
Here you published Zong.
I think I was there to do, Kofi was helping me to do something around Zong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what
That was
are
the
you
last
doing
time.
in Ghana, Abby?
I'm about to return to Brazil.
Oh!
Those of us who are political appointees in our ambassadorial positions serve the pleasure of the president. And there was an election. So we had to return until our president
you were recalled.
re-elected. Yep, but I'm one of the few that has been reappointed and sent back to the same place.
Excellent.
So headed back to Brazil shortly after Easter. So you'll need to come and show up. You got 3 more years to show up, okay?
I know, we keep saying that. We keep saying that.
So if everybody has their copy of the book, hold it up. That would be so lovely.
Oh, let me go for mine.
Wow.
Let me go for
I don't even have mine. I have to go get it.
Hold on.
We get a shot of it. Yeah.
Mine is locked away in my office at work.
That's okay.
Yeah.
COVID. On the COVID lock and key.
I can't find.
Mine is sadly in a box in a storage space in New Jersey.
Mine is here.
We just want to put him.
And mine is not far from here, but I have to leave you to get it. It's in one room over.
Well, go and get it, Elaine.
I'll get it quick.
I'll go get it.
Yeah, and then we close off with that. Anybody else want to say anything?
My much battered copy, which I've used in my teaching over the years. I don't understand why I was not visible when I was speaking. It's just amazing.
No, it probably was on my end. I don't know if maybe they muted it so we didn't have to see on the audience. So I figured out.
No, people email me to say, "What's up? We're not seeing it, but you're sounding good." And then afterwards, when I tried again, they said they had been muted by the host.
Oh,
the video was off. Somebody didn't want me to be resplendently viewed, but it's okay.
No, I got you. We saw you resplendently.
Hey, Betty.
Yes, love. Hi. I've just moved house, and my copy is at the other house because I have no internet, so I'm not there now.
Where you moved to, Betty?
To my son's apartment on Marley Road.
Okay.
Right by Marley.
You're downsizing.
So I went to...
Getting ready to pass to the ancestors.
Behave yourself.
No, get out of here. No, people
behave yourself, Betty.
Thank you. People are living now to 90 and 100. Come on.
Behave yourself.
So I saved my daughter having to clear my house. That's what I'm doing.
Okay, but you are allowed to do that.
Yes.
So I went to get my other copy, which is a hardback.
Oh, wow.
Don't show off. Don't bother to show off.
I have the paperback, but I thought I would show you there was one like this as well.
Elaine, don't bother pull rank and show off.
Show off, Elaine. Show off. You're entitled.
Yes.
Show off. You're entitled.
I hope somebody takes a photograph of this. I can. But that was
My book is. I'm going to show the essay that was in the book because my book is locked away. I'm going to show the essay.
I will take a screenshot on the count of 3. 1,
2,
3. Done.
That's how you need the young scholars for the technology. I would not be able to do that.
And on that note, we probably should
post it again. I drank all my percent.
This has been
Good night.
Hey. Happy 30th birthday.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Yay.
Thank you, Carol. I like Donna that she said it's a big woman.